Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Revamped Founder. In this episode, we have Pablo Ruiz-Múzquiz joining us. He is the co-founder and current CEO of Kaleidos. This was an incredible and really interesting conversation. So enjoy. So, hey Pablo, how are you?
Hey, hello, Advik. Thank you for having me. Fine.
Yeah, no. So, before starting, can you just give a little introduction of yourself to the listeners who might not know you? Because I know
Sure,
that there are a lot of people that might know you.
sure. My name is Pablo Ruiz-Múzquiz. I'm from Spain. I live in Madrid, and my academic background is in physics and in computer science. And I've since 1996, 1997, I've been heavily involved in everything open source, both in hacktivism and professionally also, making a living out of developing products using open source or products that are open source. And over the past 10, 11 years, I've been honored to be the CEO of a company in Spain called Kaleidos, in Kaleidoscope, where we were creating products for other companies, startups, or big corporations using open source with a strong ethos around what to do, what not to do with our talent and privilege. And recently, during the pandemic, we decided to um, go all in with our own open source products. We have many, but the two most known are Taiga, Taiga, which is an open source agile tool, and
Mhm.
Penpot, PNPOT, which is an design and prototyping tool. So recently we have been very successful in both products and in trying to um, merge the lean process, the agile process, how teams work and develop cross-functional teams, but also the design process. So both the lean and design processes together using Tiger and Penpot. Other than that, I love reading, I love traveling, I love archery, traditional
Yeah.
archery. That's my passion. I love role-playing games, and I love gardening. So I think that's pretty decent short bio.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, what was the vision behind Kaleidos? When when did you think about starting it?
So there are two Kaleidos. So the first Kaleidos was born in 2011, and that was a company that we were hoping we were hoping to create this company where we would put our talent and privilege to good use, serving other people's interests, but interests that would correlate with our own in terms of good impact of technology in society. And that lasted, 8, 9 years. The recent Kaleidos, the current incarnation of Kaleidos is an open source company, completely open source. And the vision is to bring developers and designers together using open source tools and open standards. It's basically this belief that it is key for society to see technology being created by both designers and coders, by creative people and engineers working together using the right tools and the right processes. So anything that is interesting for those cross-functional teams, we will probably develop it. One, sooner or later we will develop it. We started with Taiga,
Mhm.
which is an agile tool. You have Scrum and Kanban as techniques to enjoy, and that was our way to bring designers into the lean process. With Penpod, we're doing like the other way around. We're using a design tool, a design and prototyping tool, to bring developers into the design process. So the vision is open source and open standards, cross-functional teams, um, and bridging the gap between designers and developers. Particularly in open source, we have 99% of people involved are developers, not many designers. That is not ideal. So we try to help change that. But also in software in general, we want to see more open source in many areas, not only in infrastructure, databases, network stack, machine learning, but also in end user tools. And we want to do that, and at the same time be proud of what we're doing, who we are serving, and honoring our strong values in the company.
Yeah. So like, why did you guys decide to create it open source? Open source, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Go ahead.
the reason we went as a company uh, to go for open source instead of
Yeah, yeah,
closed source,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the reason is because we strongly believe in the relevance, the importance of technology serving society, and we don't think closed source technology is helping everyone. I think that closed source technology helps some people, but makes that technology inaccessible to the global population. So for us, it's a basic element of making providing a fairer society through technology. And we can take those risks. We can make mistakes and still be okay because we are super privileged. We are in the technology business. We we don't fear, except for massive catastrophe. We don't fear losing our jobs. We have immense talent, and we know that worst case scenario we just have to work for just another employer. So when you know that and you have no fear of the worst case scenario consequences, you can really try and you know do something for the better. And we just believe that it's that sharing is caring, that it is actually both the right thing to do and a very smart thing to do open source technology instead of closed source, so that whatever we do, it reaches out to everyone. And then we will get more people innovating, more people creating, more people being on top of that, and having this technology sovereignty and sorting out their own issues and challenges without that barrier, entry level barrier that is closed source so many times. So it's just a worldview really for us. And of course, we need to make it sustainable. We need to make that a viable business. But there's many ways you can do that with open source. And so we don't really care much about that that path. We are certain that we are sustainable and we will sustainable.
Yeah, so in fact, I got to know about Kaleidos like through Penpot. So
Yeah,
after the acquisition of Figma by
yeah.
Adobe, I was searching for an alternative. I think everyone was doing that, like, because everyone was panicking that they might remove the free version. So in search of that, I found Penpot, and actually it was
Mhm.
quite good. So can you shed some light on the acquisition and all the other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had this thesis a few years ago when we decided to create Penpot. We saw that there were no open source design and prototype tools like for collaboration for designers and developers, and we decided that we needed to develop one. It would be open source and it would use open standards like SVG on the browser. So multi-platform for everyone, no vendor locking. And our thesis was that developers would, of course, get it because developers are typically more inclined to know the benefits of open source, even if it's not a tool for them initially. And I say this underscore initially because they do engage with design prototyping tools, whether they like it or not, because it's part of the software development process. And But we also had this other thesis that said that designers would actually care for a product, for a design and prototyping tool that would be that would bring them design freedom and open standards. When Adobe acquired Figma, what we saw was that we were right, that a lot of designers saw the risk of closed source design tools, the risk of putting too much investment into one tool with closed source formats on a proprietary SaaS model where your designs are actually not yours. And we saw that emotional distress and the sudden realization, like this eye-opener event, where not developers, but actually designers started looking for an alternative. Now, they could have found, let's say, another Figma tool, just another thing similar to Figma, just not Figma in its infancy, and they would probably have decided, okay, I'll do this out of dismay, but I know I'm actually going for the same problem in a few years because this is fundamentally the same. I'm just changing a hat, but it's the same hat eventually. When they found about Penpot, they saw something very different, like fundamentally different. It was open source, so freedom forever. It was based on open standards, so that meant that their design was not closed. Their design was theirs. And also they saw the approach by Penpot, which is to make sure that design is code and code is design, and that the collaboration between designers and developers finally can be a reality, and design can scale up. When they saw all those three things, they switched to Penpot willingly, right? That they knew about Penpot through that acquisition because they were looking for alternatives, and the reaction was phenomenal. Like we saw our registration numbers, but not only signups, whether on SaaS or local deployments, since you can run your own Penpot server wherever you want. Even you can have your own desktop Penpot app if you want. But also the mind share, what people were saying about Penpot. It is like, okay, this is the feature. This is the feature, and we needed this Adobe event to get to know the feature, right? So people are really excited about Penpot, and even if a lot of designers are still trapped using Figma because they cannot just overnight pick another tool and continue working like magic. We get it. That doesn't happen. Most of them have already made that decision. Like the decision has been made, like in their minds. They know they cannot continue using Figma because they are now within Adobe, and Adobe is well known for its aggressiveness in terms of shutting down companies that they acquire. I don't think this is going to happen, but they will have to shut down Adobe XD, which is their own Figma's competitor, and also Adobe raises prices, goes only for the corporate world, doesn't care about the individual. They have a long track record of being toxic to designers. So unfortunately for Figma, they chose the worst possible acquirer. And they knew this. Actually, Figma was born out of animosity against Adobe. They said, we are the anti-Adobe, right? So when Adobe acquired Figma, there was this feeling of betrayal from their users. Like, really, Figma? It had to be Adobe. Couldn't be like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, I don't know, Apple. It had to be Adobe. So we have seen massive growth, but also massive joy. Like it's not just users, like refugees, coming from one tool to another. It's actually people really loving what they're seeing, and so it's been great, and it has been a breaking moment for us in terms of the company and the critical mass that we needed in a year. We have that critical mass now.
Yeah. So like you said that Figma was about to be the anti-Adobe. But then why did according to you, why did the Figma leadership decide to sell the company to Adobe?
Hmm, very good question. I don't really know the facts. I can only
Yeah,
speculate.
yeah,
Um, my my feeling here is that they they raised couple 100 million last year for their Series E, and I don't think they needed the money, but they needed a price point. They needed to set up the new valuation, and that was 10 billion. So I
yeah,
think the important thing about the Series E was that someone said, okay, this company um, is 10 billion in worth, right?
yeah,
When you see that, Series E is typically the last step towards IPO, going
yeah,
public, right? So you could see that as a checkpoint,
yeah,
and probably they would. This is pure speculation. I don't have
yeah, yeah,
any
yeah. I get it. I
intel.
get it.
I don't really know what really happened. I just,
Yeah.
from the information that I have.
Hmm.
So if you have Series E, 200 million in November, October last year,
Yeah.
you're probably looking at 2 to 3 years, perhaps. Yeah, in 2 years you do IPO.
Hmm.
But then the recession started looming
Yeah.
over, and that caught them off guard. Probably a lot of, actually, a lot of companies, big companies that were going IPO, or were raising their Series
Hmm.
D or Series E, um, got in trouble, in deep trouble,
Yeah.
and we're seeing layoffs now because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were
That's
not
fine.
able to access liquidity at the, in the range that they need. And these companies are huge, and they just burn money every month, right?
Hmm.
So when you suddenly see yourself at the beginning of a recession that might last 3 years, that means that you are not going to grow
Hmm.
much, right? And that means that the IPO is not going to be gentle to you. You're probably
Yeah.
not going to go 5 times Series E, like 50 billion, right, for the
Hmm.
IPO. You probably start being fearful of the future, and you act desperately. Again, this is pure speculation,
Yeah.
and you want a plan B, and a plan B
Hmm.
is an acquisition.
Yeah.
And I guess that acquisition had to happen, and it turned out to be the only one that wanted to do that was Adobe.
Yeah.
And the price point was 20 billion. So in terms of
Hmm.
the um, the raising price, not much. 2x is not
Yeah.
much. I mean, if you compare that to what they were expecting, right? It's a
Hmm.
ton of money, a ton of money.
Yeah.
But so I think basically the Adobe thing was a plan B to exit,
Hmm.
to escape from a recession that would
Yeah.
have made Figma's journey for the next 3 years really hard. I don't really know what happened, but
Yeah.
everyone agrees, regardless
Hmm.
of what you think, what I think, everyone would agree that
Yeah.
this was really weird. This was
Yeah.
unexpected,
Yeah.
uh, and the amount that was paid is just short of half what Elon Musk
Yeah.
has paid for Twitter, just
Yeah.
for a design and prototyping
Absolutely.
tool. That
Hmm.
is a ton of money. Then
Yeah.
the fact that Figma wanted to sell, and the fact that actually accepted Adobe, their declared enemy upon birth. So
Yeah.
no wonder still people are like asking tough questions like, what just happened, right? right?
Yeah.
So
Uh,
it's n- I don't know. People closer to the matter might have a completely different story. Like this was planned years ago, and this was all part of the plan. I don't know, but it's surprising to say the least. Yeah.
yeah. So now with the recession looming over,
Hmm.
uh, how is it affecting you guys at Kaleidos? If it is like,
I think that the recession affects us in two different levels. As
yeah,
citizens,
yeah,
it affects us because we have inflation and we have economy challenges and we have political challenges, and that affects us regardless of where we are, right? So it is
yeah,
affecting us. Not
yeah,
much because we're still in this bubble, but of course it is affecting us. In terms of the
yeah,
company, it is not affecting us because we are at a very early stage. We are an open source company that does not invest so much in sales and marketing. We are in this stage where we really need the community to 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 see if we have something of value, um, use it
yeah,
and adopt it, and word of mouth. And since we are open source and this is very accessible technology, marginally the costs are marginal for you to take Penpot or Taiga and use it. We're not being impacted, by any recession
yeah,
because we don't. There's no relationship between the cost of living and the fact that you can or cannot use our products. You can always use our products.
yeah.
So I don't think, and early stage companies like ourselves, we just recently announced that we raised our Series A. That was, by
Yeah,
the way,
$8 million, right?
yeah, months ago. We just announced it recently. There's nothing to do with the Adobe acquisition. It's
Yeah,
impossible to 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 secure 8 million just after a week, or
yeah,
just days after Adobe acquires something. That doesn't happen. That was months in the making. Um, but we've secured the money to
hmm,
make sure that we can continue to develop an amazing product, and so people can trust that regardless of how challenging times are going to be in the next 2 to 3 years, their productivity tools in software development are going to be completely accessible and free for everyone.
mm. So right now, like Penpot has only a free version. Like there's no paid version.
No,
To
uh,
my knowledge, is there?
there will be some way for you to pay for something
Yeah,
extra, something
yeah,
exclusive. Basically, we will be targeting enterprises. The
hmm,
bigger, the better,
yeah,
around features that are needed just at the corporate level. In terms of the power user, uh,
yeah,
you should always see um, Penpot and Taiga free forever. So
yeah,
this model has worked great for other open source companies like GitLab or Mattermost, or I'm saying those because they are not the typical super backend or database oriented, so people might know them.
hmm,
Basically they have 99% is open source, and then that 1% is just meant for enterprises. It is a delicate matter because you need to be sure that there's no conflict of interest. That what at least for us, whatever is interesting for the power user should always remain open source. And then if you're a company, a corporation that wants something extra that is only interesting and relevant for you, but you cannot contribute code, you cannot do anything other than pay for it, then pay for it, right? What
yeah,
exactly that will mean, we are not in a rush to decide. We still want to have at least 1 year of, you know, um, internal discussion, and
yeah,
then decide whether. But everyone should, rest assured that the original name of the company is actually Kaleidos open source. So we are,
yeah,
we come from the trenches in open source, and we want to make sure that whatever we build for other people is what we would like other people to build for us. So in that sense, there cannot be any Adobe acquisition by design, just because the technology is open and will remain open.
That's good. Now, like the last question related to Penpot,
Mhm.
I'll ask, what is the current, like, where is the design field currently? Like, because of locking in a lot of like the Figma acquisition and all of this stuff, what is the future and what is it like right now?
I think the present in design and prototyping, so referring specifically to software development, is
Yeah.
that there is very limited options. Um, you had if you are a designer, a UX UI designer
Mhm.
in software development, you might have been using InVision, then you probably head of Sketch, then you moved on to Figma. You basically follow a very linear path. So it's like the cool tool and the tool that was cool before that one. Is very
Yeah.
linear, very limited. And I think that's just terrible, terrible. I get it that creating a design and prototype tool is very tough. I'm not
Yeah.
saying creating a tool that allows an individual to actually, without coding skills, develop a website, or without design skills, be able to code themselves through an app. I'm not saying that for the individual. There are a lot of tools that empower individuals and give them like, yeah, superpowers. I'm referring here to cross-functional teams, like high performance teams that need the best out of every different role in the team, like
Yeah.
developers and designers, for instance. So developers have been enjoying a plethora of options in open source, from IDEs to databases to frameworks to whatever. Uh, but designers have been really limited to a bunch of options. So that's the present. What we want for the future is to open up that design space and make sure that there's more options, particularly options that come from open source, and allow those tools to extend, to mutate, to evolve the way designers would like, with the help of developers and designers. So I think the future of design tools is going to be one where there is open source and open standards, but also designers and developers using those design tools together. I think it is very important that the future of design involves developers in a way that developers are not overtaking or being bossy about design, but actually enjoying the design process and contributing to it. Right now, there is a lost in translation issue where designers design, and then when they're finished or almost finished, they hand off that to developers, who take that with extreme care and fear of making mistakes. And there's this constant back and forth conversation where everyone is fearful of making mistakes, or not having the latest version of something, or not being respectful, or what they're doing, or the deliverable from the other part. And there's this dysfunctional conversation. So the future of design has to be a functional conversation, a collaboration between designers and developers using open source design tools. And I honestly believe that Penpot will have a big role to play, but I don't think it's going to just be Penpot. I think more tools, more open source tools around design will pop up, and
Yeah.
I'll be very happy to see that. And as a collateral effect, as a side effect, we should see more designers coming to open source and
Yeah.
bringing innovation and creativity in design to open source products. I think that would be so great to see.
Yeah. So you do not fear competitors. You're
No,
not against it.
no, 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 no. I think there's no competition right now in design
Yeah.
space. for design and prototyping, for software development, basically you have Figma, now Adobe, that
Yeah.
represents the proprietary SaaS, closed source, control environment where your design is not yours, where the process is just a silo for designers. And then you have Penpot, which is open source, uses SVG as an open standard where the approach is completely different. It's about designers and developers collaborating with each other. And it's just, there's no competition. I mean, there is competition, but what I'm saying is that right now it is a joke. There's just two players. That is not competition, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I hope to see more of these platforms in the future. This will be better for everyone, also for us.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Like, so moving on, like, what can you explain Taiga in simple manner, like in short and sweet terms? What is it at the core?
Sure. So Taiga, we developed Taiga a few years ago as an agile tool. So you can go there with your team and manage your project in an agile way. You can pick a Scrum technique or Kanban technique, and also add epics and issues and wiki. And the nice idea about Taiga is that Taiga brings designers into the lean process, into the agile process, really welcoming them. Like it's a beautiful tool. It's very simple yet very powerful and flexible, and allows you to start simple and then grow in complexity as your team demands. That has been the evolution of Taiga so far. We have Taiga 6 as our latest major release. We are now working on Taiga Next, which is the code name, which is going to go one step beyond and think of the future of Agile, the future of Lean, and how to connect project management, user stories, scope in general with design and prototypes. So we will be merging, we will be, connecting the next iteration of Taiga with Penpot, so that you can enjoy in one team both access to the scope definition and track of the project, tasks, whatever, with the design and prototypes that are already connected to the code. So it's in our the way we see this is to bring more design and more designers into Agile and into software development in general. So that will be released at some point next year. The next major release of Taiga is going to be completely revamped, and it's going to be the only Agile tool, the only project management tool that is completely accessible, really accessible. That we are developing every feature on Taiga, every drag and drop, every changing status, everything that you can do with Taiga, like changing roles, permissions, onboarding users to your team, is going to be 100% accessible. So everyone will be welcome to something so critical as to the decision-making process in projects. So I hope people will enjoy that experience.
Yeah. So like my last question before going will be, what, like, are you planning on raising more rounds in the future? Like more Series B, Series C? Like that.
Yeah, probably. Not now. Like we don't see the need. We just got our Series A.
Yeah.
We don't see any need for Series B. I think what we have to do is just focus on building our products.
Yeah.
With this money allows us to just be distractionless and just focus on
Yeah.
building a great product and a great community. Yeah, I guess Series B at some point in the next few years, but it's not like an immediate concern. So yeah, and at some point, regardless of Series B or whatever, we do want to put in place a business model around our products, so that we have proof that we can do great open source products and be profitable. I
So
think
right now,
that's probably
Kaleidos
more.
is not right?
It was Kaleidos was profitable before we went with our open source products because we had consultancy and services. So we've been
Yeah.
profitable for 10 years. Right now, we are basically investing our savings and asking from some angels for some money and some friendly venture capital to make sure that even if we're not profitable right now, we have the capacity to have a full-time team devoted on building this. But we want to be profitable sooner rather than later, because for us that is very important to be one of the many examples of viable open source companies that are not just raising money, but actually having a valid business model. Otherwise, you're just raising money. That's what's the point of that, right? You
Yeah.
want to you want to raise money as an investment to make sure that you reach the monetization milestone. You don't raise money to then raise more money. I mean, I know people do that, but it's not what we want to do, really. That's not our point. We want the money now to make sure that we are not distracted by rushing to monetization, and instead build something bigger. And then, only then, if we are really successful um, in being really relevant as a product, then we will decide, who to ask money for what exactly.
Yeah. That's good. Like now, I really don't have any further questions. If you'd like
No,
to add anything, then
I think the only thing I would like to add is for anyone listening to this, the driving force for everything we do at Kaleidos is that make sure to ask yourself who is
yeah,
benefiting from what you're doing, right? So
yeah,
why are you doing this? Who is benefiting? If you are successful, who is going to be successful too? And sometimes the answers are perhaps not going to be very exciting. Like if I'm successful, these people that already are successful are going to be even more successful. But what's the point of that? At least for us, what drives us is that whatever we do, we make sure that if we are successful, a lot of people will benefit from that. Whenever you are driving a company or a project, just pause for a moment and consider if you are successful, who is going to benefit from your success? Because you might find out that actually the people that are going to benefit the most are not, they don't need that benefit so much. They're already very successful. So in terms of making a difference, I think it's important
yeah,
that whenever you go ahead and decide this is what we're going to do as a professional career, as an entrepreneur, that you think what is the net gain for the rest of the people
mhm,
if you really accomplish your vision.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's what I would think, and that's why what we always ask ourselves at Kaleidos: make sure not to do things just because for the sake of doing them, but thinking of who is going to benefit from what we are doing if we are successful.